everyone, welcome back to the channel. So, Springboks play the Wallabies for the second test in Perth, and in summary, I think the Wallabies put together a much more challenging performance for the Springboks than they did in the first test. I think they definitely cleared up some of the shame that they just spilt all over the floor in the first test. But at the same time, and dare I say it, I feel like they were playing the B team of the Springboks.
So I never knew there was a Springbok side that was called the B team.
Even though the scores doesn't suggest it, I think they gave them a run for their money. I think that the Wallabies went for pressure straight from the kickoff. They were willing to take what was available to them. I think Lolesio, apologies if I got that wrong, Noah, for lack of a better name to call him. I think his place kicking was really, really good. And the penalty opportunities that they got were numerous from the Springboks. I counted that they got 5 in the first half and 5 in the second half. And they did capitalise on every opportunity they had with Noah's kicking to get the 3 points where they were available. Early on, you could see the Springboks were trying to build on their counter-attacking rugby that they had really implemented in the first test, but it just wasn't quite clicking. Sasha knocked it on for what was a certain try, which was an excellent return by Colby. I don't know what they were thinking with Colby being kicked to, and then the defence was not tight on him. He was given acres of space, and then he offloads it to Sasha, and Sasha knocks it on for what would have been an easy try. Mapimpi had a very similar knock-on as well that just was like, man, like, he had a crossfield kick that came to him. He was almost in the corner. And you've got to give credit to Tom Wright for tackling the ball rather than the man, and he managed to knock it on out of Mapimpi's hands. So I felt like the Boks had a lot of frustrations going on in the first half, and Australia just kind of stuck around. They defensively were good. Attacking, man, it did not look good for me for the Wallabies. Again, you're going against South Africa, so this is a team that's obviously known for its defence, known for being able to hold out opposition very, very well and making the best attacks look good. But it almost seemed to me in the first half in particular that the Australia's attack was basically based off of Nick White seeing what was on and him making a decision of what was going on, whether he would pop it off or he would just run rampant. As time went on, I actually wrote a note. As I thought about it more, I felt like the connection between 9 and 10 between Nick White and Lolesio, sorry if I've got that wrong. Again, just call him Noah. I felt like the connection wasn't there. Is this kind of like a panic decision, suddenly to include Nick White in the squad to have a bit of experience in there? I don't know. It could be, but the attacking chemistry was not there for me for the Wallabies, and they struggled to get anything going. They took advantage of opportunities that they had, aka South Africa making penalties within their own half and taking the 3 points on offer. In terms of producing something fresh and in terms of attack, other than when it was off first phase, I think the Wallabies really struggled to have some momentum in that regard, and it'll be concerning for Joe Schmidt for sure. There was some terrible there was some terrible Springboks box kicking off the back of rucks. I'm not sure of the scrum half's name. I haven't seen him play before. I really do not think he had a good game whatsoever. I think this might be a weak point for South Africa. If you think about South African teams in the past, especially of kind of my younger years, and up until now, they've always had world-class scrum halves, from whether it was Fua de Pruya, Ruan Pienaar, and Faf de Klerk. And now I feel like there is a bit of a gap there in terms of a world-class 9 being able to boss the connection between the forwards and backs, which I think for a South African side is really, really important. Scrum half is so dependent on their play because they have such a powerful pack that they need a scrum half that's going to box kick accurately, get the ball to them quickly and in front of them when they go for inside runs, and also know when to make the decision of when to get it out to the backs as well. It's really key in how the Springboks play. They need to have that interlink between their forwards and back play. Reinhardt, I think, had a good game last week. He was okay, but he wasn't like standout, excellent, stamp him in at that 9 shirt from now on. So I think that's something to watch out for the Boks. They don't really have someone coming into that 9 shirt that's up and coming. Please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Let me know who to look for, who's been playing great domestic rugby. I'm just not seeing that right now. And the guy who played today was not it for me, I'm afraid. Let's talk about Sasha in general, because he is obviously a big focal point of this new Springbok side, having played great domestically and having a good game last week. A little bit less good game this week. So he missed a bit of a sitter of a place kick. Other than that, his kicking to goal was great. He got all the rest of them. He had that knock on that I'd already previously talked about. But then I felt like he just disappeared from the game. He wasn't there. Like, by the time we get into the second half, I felt like I was 55 minutes into the game and I'm suddenly thinking, I've not really made any notes about Sasha since that knock on. So it's not a good sign that he's just kind of suddenly disappeared in a game where I felt like someone needed to take the game by the scruff of the neck and take control. Sasha didn't do that today. And that's concerning, I think, if you're the Springboks, Rassie. You're kind of thinking, right, at this point, Sasha had a good first game, although he wasn't challenged, and he didn't have to build the phases. The second game he disappeared, and he had a much more average performance, nothing that kind of stood out. And now you're kind of stuck in this like twilight zone of fly half selection where you don't know what the right selection is against an All Black side that just had a very, very good game against Argentina. Now, granted, you still probably got a stronger team than New Zealand, so the pressure isn't as on to get that fly half selection right. But this is an opposition that's similar to like an Ireland or a France. This is the best of the best. Obviously, New Zealand probably look a little bit more vulnerable than they have in previous years. You're going to want to get that fly half selection right from the get-go, and if you don't, you could get behind, and that could spell bad news. And no one's really put their signpost up to be like, I'm the 10 to be picked. So there is a little bit of selection drama for that 10 shirt going against New Zealand. I think if it was me, I don't know what I would do. I would maybe just go with Pollard. It seems like it's a safe choice. It would be playing classic box rugby, which worked really well against New Zealand in the World Cup and also prior to that. Sasha might be the more flair pick, seeing how he does. You don't put that much importance in actually winning the championship, and you put more importance on understanding what Sasha's real potential is. I feel like we learned that with Manny Libok in the Rugby Championship last year, where he was excellent against beating up against lower opposition, but when it came to New Zealand, he got stifled and he wasn't the guy to play in that 10 shirt. And it became obvious as the tournament went on, I'm talking about the World Cup now, so that Pollard had to be brought into the squad to then ultimately play fly half and I think win South Africa the championship with that change in the end. So what do you want to do? Do you want to test out Sasha against a much better opponent, or do you want to just try and win the tournament? It'll be interesting to see what Rassie does. You can't really criticise him whatever way he goes because of how good he is as a coach. So it does kind of leave a question mark in like what you're going to be doing at fly half next weekend. Interesting and really fascinated to see what he does. Etzebeth came on early when they were obviously trying to rest him there was a second row injury and he came on. And to be honest with you, I think he kind of steadied the ship a little bit in terms of that Springbok pack. I counted in the first half that there was 3 missed lineouts for the Springboks, which like doesn't happen, never mind in like half a game. I think at scrum time, they even lost a scrum to a penalty as well. It did not look like it was the cohesive Springbok never make mistake kind of play that they usually do. I even said that I think the hooker that came on, well, didn't came on, he started for South Africa, was not really up to par. Again, I think a lot of these throws was probably down to him. In very bad weather, in like the first line-out that the Springboks had, they had a really overcomplicated line-out move and the throw wasn't there either. And I wrote a note at about, I think, the 25-minute mark. I would not be surprised if we saw Malcolm Marx come on at 45 minutes. And like so many of my predictions, but also so many not of my predictions, at 45 minutes, it came true. Malcolm Marx came on with Oxenche. And I think with Etzebeth already on the pitch, I think we really saw a complete difference in how the pack operated. The scrums were much more dominant until obviously the uncontested scrums happened, and we'll get into the significance of that in a bit. The line-out was cleared up. I think there was only one line-out that South Africa lost after that point. But to give context, I think they had a total of like close to 20 line-outs for the whole game. So there was a lot of Springbok line-outs. Everything just seemed to kind of clear up and they sort of got back into their very diligent, workhorse, clinical forward play that they're used to. So what does this mean? So in my opinion, and I think in a lot of people's opinions, the South African pack that was starting the game was not their first choice. Dare I say it was their B team.
So you don't have to be a smart ass, mate.
There's 2 ways you can look at this. You can go like, well, we won, we managed to still win with a bonus point and it's fine. And that's probably what a lot of fans will think. if you're a coach and you're looking at this, you're kind of worried that the people that are kind of next in line to step into those shirts aren't ready. They're not ready to take on the Springbok jersey. They're not ready to play at the level that's required of them. I think specifically the second rows, I think loose head prop, hooker, as I've already mentioned, they were all kind of players that once they were replaced, things started to get a lot better for South Africa. So that is an issue I think that Rassie will take note of. He'll have to do some work in the background in getting these guys up to scratch. Part of South Africa's strength is their depth of squad, especially in the pack, aka the bomb squad and all of the press that's around that. So he's got an interesting task now in terms of who do I trust going forward in terms of being on that bomb squad to come on and replace players when necessary. There is someone driving a very loud motorcycle outside. Jesus. Anyway, that's interesting. Keeping it on the pack, I think another thing that I noticed that not until actually the game was over, I wrote no notes about Low playing at 8, which is again concerning if you're a Springbok fan. You know, you think about 8s in the past of like PSBs and Jasper Wiese most recently, and they really benefit from having very powerful runners that get them over the gain line, and they are a safe bet to just kind of always just make that ground when it's needed, and you just need to give the ball to somebody to kind of release the pressure. Low was transparent but not fat this weekend. He just wasn't there. So what do you do at 8? You know, I think you've got a lot of selections there. I think Evan Roos might, in my opinion, should be given a go. Yeah, I think maybe you got to think about who you want to select that 8 shirt going into a very important New Zealand test and whether you want to keep it with Low. I felt like Low had a pretty good game last week, not a great game, probably like a 7 out of 10, and he kind of disappeared in this game. So interesting selection at 8 for them in the future. So Slipper comes on for an injury to the tight head for Australia. He then comes off for a HIA, and we go to uncontested scrums. I think this just kind of gave the Wallabies an opportunity to take advantage of this. South Africa obviously very famous for having that strong pack that especially kind of comes into its own in the second half because they have the bomb squad where scrummage specialists come on, and that's when they can start winning penalties and really turning the game. For example, in the semi-final against England, this made a big difference, I think, for them winning the game compared to possibly losing it. That advantage was taken away from South Africa, and I was thinking, like, at about the 60, 65 minute mark, I was thinking, okay, so you're Australia, it's not been pretty, but you've kicked the goals that you've had the opportunities you've had, you've managed to keep the defence stout, you're only 6 points behind South Africa at this point, and you've got Jorgensen, who's just come on, who I think was interesting. To be honest, he looked really exciting as a player. You just kind of, you're feeling like there's a chance here, there's an opportunity. And then the moment that I thought that, it all just kind of fell apart. I mean, there was just penalty after penalty. I counted in the second half, the Wallabies gave away 7 penalties compared to in the first half, they gave away 3. And that was like so significant. It just gave so much territory back to South Africa, who eventually went down and scored 2 tries off of lineouts from those penalties where they gained the territory for it. It just felt like they just kind of let an opportunity slip. As I said, the attack wasn't quite there. There were moments like Tom Wright in his own 22 doing a little cross. No, it wasn't crossfield. He was in the middle, but he had a little chip to Jorgensen and he went flying down the pitch. There were these little moments that were starting to build where you're just thinking like, maybe they got a chance here. Maybe they got a chance. They kind of just threw the game away at the end. Like I don't think there's any. There's nothing. There's no fairer statement I think for the Wallabies in that regard. They just threw away the opportunity that they had to win this game. Poor weather. No one's really playing well, and you know you're within 6 points. You're just kind of like you're thinking like, we can do this. We can get over this. They had like a scrum or a line out down at the 5 meter. They knock it on. They get kicked back, and then it's a penalty after penalty, and then all of a sudden the game's basically over because a try happens literally 2 minutes later. And Joe Schmidt, must be kicking himself, to be honest with you, because You can't just keep kicking yourself when the opportunities are there. You have to take them. And it was definitely there for Australia today. I definitely felt like they had an opportunity to steal a win at the end that maybe they didn't fully deserve. But if they just kind of kept it tight and they kept it going, they could have won the game. But they didn't. And I think Schmidt will be quite unhappy about how they performed in those final 20 minutes of the game. As a few final statements, I think the Wallabies in general, much improved from last week. I think, again, it's a young team that's developing. If I'm Schmidt, I'd just start Jorgensen in the next game against Argentina. Why not? Let him just kind of play loose. He looks so much more exciting and quicker than anybody that was on the pitch before he was on. I think there's a lot to build there. I think the main thing I think that I would think they would want to be doing in training leading up to that Argentina game is just understanding how to change attack after first phase. Like, how do we build attack? How do we build phases? Because they just lack that today. And maybe against a defence that's still going to be quite blitzy in Argentina, but maybe less, maybe just a tad less, not intense. I'm struggling for a word here. Maybe there's going to be, I think it's fair to say there'll be more gaps in the Argentinian defence than there would be in the South African one. So maybe there's more opportunities there to utilise for the Wallabies and they can play a little bit better. So we'll see. On the South African side, I think you've got to be worried about the guys coming in from the back, as I've already said. I think 1, 2 in particular, they did not play well, and when they were replaced, everything got a lot better. And I think as much as I've said about the pack, and as little as I've said about the backs, I think you have to say from 12 outwards for South Africa, they all had excellent games. I think Am had a very, very good game. Obviously used to be a very regular fixture in this side and then had that injury, and Jesse Creel came in that 13 shirt and he's really kind of like held on to it because he's played excellently. But Am came in at 12 and I think he had a great game both in attack and defence. He was great in counter-attack and really instrumental in defence as well. Jesse Creel, boy, he just has great games and his work rate throughout every single game is just excellent. And I think the wingers also played very, very well, other than Mapimpi obviously knocking it on. But he had that kick through for that try to the 15, who I think also had a great game. And Colby has at least 3 or 4 highlights every single game as well, and doesn't really give anything away defensively. So as much as I think I was critical of the pack, of the Springboks, I think that was of more note. I want to give credit to the back line, who I thought was actually really excellent today, other than 9 and 10, who I think, points of improvement in the future. So really interesting going into this New Zealand game in 2 weeks' time. Selection, I really don't know what's going to happen here in terms of who's going to play in some very key positions, but we'll see. And maybe we'll talk about it beforehand, maybe we won't. In any regard, I'll catch you in the next one.